Hello, everyone. How is everybody doing? I hope everybody is doing amazing. My name is Chris Tronson. As you can see, I'm just getting the questions ready for today. There we go. I got them all. So, hello, everybody. How are you doing? So, I am solo today. I am solo, solo, solo. So, you have me all to yourself. Liz is speaking today, so she wasn't able to make it. So, all of you Liz fans, I am so, so sorry that you don't have Liz, just me, but I hope I am enough. I'm going to stand that I am enough. But no, if you're just joining us, so Ask the Experts is every first and third Wednesday of the month. The second Wednesday of the month, which is 9 a.m. my time, noon Eastern, we have a research roundtable. So Dr. Abramowitz and one of our IOCDF advocates, Kyle King, they come on, they read a piece of research, they give it to you in digestible verbiage, so you can kind of intake some of the latest and greatest OCD literature that's putting out there. And then sometimes if it's a month with a fifth Wednesday, you'll have either Liz or I solo, or we join together. So like I said, I miss Liz. She is out speaking on behalf of OCD. So she won't be here with me today. It's just going to be me solo, but I am super excited to have everybody here. So I already see we have some greetings from Brazil and from Spain. What I think is so neat is I believe because of the time that we do this, a lot of the international folks join us. So I always know that when we're doing our live streams, we get international folks, which is awesome. So I'm super happy about that. So everybody tell me where you are from. I always like to hear where everybody is from. We have Grace from Michigan. Hi from Michigan. And we have Maria from New Jersey, Michelle from New York City. That's amazing. My mom was raised in Long Island. So I went out to New York actually to do a Montel Williams show on OCD and body dysmorphic disorder. So that was the last time I was in New York, but it was amazing. And then, of course, we have Kostas from Greece. I am half Greek, so I'm always super, super excited to see anybody from either Greece or Norway, because I'm like, my people. So I was supposed to go to Greece and Norway in 2020 and then pandemic, but looking to get back out there. We have Shannon from Texas. Hi, from San Antonio. So we have people from all over the place. I love this. So let me tell you a little bit about today. So I want to answer all of your questions. I understand that when you have OCD, you have questions, you're struggling. And before, when I was getting treatment, it was hard to get questions answered. It was hard to get resources. And that's what the IOCDF really did with this virtual programming, is they wanted to make sure that there was a sense of community, which I always see in the comments, and people having access to information and to get just support. So throughout the entire live stream, please go ahead and ask questions. You can just put it in the chat from whatever platform you're watching on, and I would love to answer your questions about OCD and related disorders, anxiety, depression, BDD, etc. Hi, Tracy. I'm glad you propped on as well. And then hello, Betsy from Pennsylvania. So welcome, everybody. What I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to give a little topic. I'm going to talk about something that's on my mind, OCD related, and then I'll jump into questions. But before we jump into questions, we have some really cool announcements. So first and foremost, just a reminder that this live stream is educational. It is not intended to replace therapy. So for treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can also use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find-help. and locate a trained clinician near you. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. So if you are in a crisis or you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the suicide prevention hotline at 800-273-8255. We want to create a safe space as possible, so be kind and respectful to everyone. This is being broadcast on several social media platforms and is being recorded. So please be mindful of this as you ask personal questions or leave comments. At the end of the day, we're all here to support each other. Some other exciting announcements. So OCD Southern California is having a virtual conference that is available for anyone, anywhere. We are an official affiliate of this great organization, the International OCD Foundation. So if you go to ocdsocal.org, you have information about our upcoming conference, which is the 30th of this month. We also have the IOCDS Faith and OCD Conference, which is May 9th. This is an online conference for faith members, faith leaders, and mental health professionals. So get more information and register at iocdf.org/faith conference. Also, registration is open for the 27th annual OCD conference. That's taking place in Denver this July. This is for the entire OCD and related disorders community, including individuals, families, supporters, therapists, and research. So more information at iocf.org/OCDCon. You will see myself, Liz, Ethan, Katie, Tommy, Val, all the people that you see on these live streams will be there in person. So come say hi. And then lastly, join us for the 1 million Steps for OCD walk. It's in June and October. You can find a walk near you and register at iocf.org/walk for a day of community advocacy and fun. So OCD SoCal, we're having 3 talks in our area in Orange County, Riverside County, and Los Angeles County and San Diego County. So if you're in Southern California, come walk with us. We're in person. Hello, Dave. Hello, Patricia. It's always good to see you. Nikki in Ireland. So good to see you. So please, like I said, make sure to jump in and throw in any questions that you may have. So a topic I wanted to bring in before I jump into the first question that I already received. I was thinking a lot about this, and I wonder if anybody can relate watching this live stream about OCD and your identity. And what I mean by that is when I talk to a lot of my clients, because I have OCD myself, and I'm also a clinician. I treat OCD and related disorders in Orange County, California. And when I was talking to a lot of clients and we run support groups, one of the things I hear from a lot is people feel a lost sense of identity. And what I mean by that is before OCD hit, maybe they were funny, they were always spending time with friends. Maybe they played sports, are really into arts, crafts, and different activities. Maybe they were going to film school because they wanted to be a director. Maybe they were learning about animals and wanted to be a vet. They enjoyed, drives along the coast, or they liked reading, or all these different things that make us up. And I always believe that all of us have a special kind of combination and set of gifts that make us truly unique. And what OCD does is it takes that away from us. And the science behind it is our brain starts getting activated more in that danger zone. And as you know, when you're in real danger, let's say a car almost hits you or a piece of a building falls near you, nothing matters in that moment but getting to safety and getting back to neutral. And the problem is OCD really taps into that. And it gets us in a kind of a mind state of constantly being in a mindset of danger. And so danger sort of triumphants over everything else going on in our lives. And as we get more severe with OCD, we stop connecting with friends, we stop going out, we might drop school or quit our jobs. We don't date as often. We're not going to be reading or doing martial arts or playing tennis or learning a language, traveling. All of that sort of subsides. And you kind of just feel like you're floating and keeping your nose just above water. And I know that when people would connect with me who hadn't seen me in a long time, some of my honest family members were like, Chris, you're like a shell of yourself. You're thin, you're pale, you're not leaving the house, you're not joking anymore, you're not funny, you don't talk about interests. And they weren't saying it from a harsh reality. They were just so shocked for the ones that saw me before I got really sick and then just after my decline. So I'm wondering if anybody can relate to that. Just kind of like a topic of thought before I jump into questions. I'm just wondering if anybody can kind of relate to that mindset of just feeling like you're losing a little of yourself to the OCD and losing your identity. And one thing that really helped me bounce back from treatment, obviously treatment itself, ERP, I did exposure response prevention with a trained OCD specialist. We really worked on ACT kind of value goals and really pushed back against the OCD. And I was on medication during my treatment. But I think what really kind of got me out of the OCD afterwards was really bouncing back and getting back into life. I started volunteering at an animal shelter and adopted a dog. I started doing tennis and martial arts and learning Spanish. And then I met a friend from martial arts who got me a job at a gym, and I started running gyms, and then went back to school, and then got back into a field I was in, and then decided to be a therapist and go to school, so getting back into life sort of started to make other things important, which made the OCD have more to compete with and become a less important. So that's a topic I'm going to throw out there. So maybe if somebody doesn't have a direct question about OCD, but wants to sort of start initiation, what I would love to hear from you is, how do you feel maybe you've lost some of your identity or some of yourself from OCD? Or flip side, what are some of the things that you fought to get back in your treatment and you're excited to start to see yourself back again? I know that my sister made a comment once. She's like, I feel like you're back. Like your hands aren't red from all the washing. You're not pale from being inside all the time. And you're making jokes again. We miss that. So just food for thought. I was thinking about that because Liz wasn't here. So we don't have back and forth banter. So I was thinking, I need to kind of start a conversation and dialogue with all of you. So I was just thinking about that with OCD and identity. Like, who are you outside of the OCD? And do you feel like it's worth fighting for to get back? So just a little food for thought. I'll definitely get down to the comments. So Skyla, I'm going to start with one of the questions that we received yesterday. So the first question is, after completing ERP therapy, do you have suggestions on ways to continue doing exposures? The weekly check-in with a therapist is helpful, but not something that is financially sustainable for life. Maybe a coach. I like the accountability of therapy, but can't afford that forever. This is the chef's kiss of questions. I know Liz loves this topic, and I talk about this with all my clients. So let's say for all of you out there, wherever you are, on your OCD journey, and you're trying to figure out like, where do I go from here? I've completed really the heart and soul of my treatment. My therapist and I have agreed we don't really have anything to work on, and it's really about me just implementing ERP in real life. I agree with you. Whoever asked the question, thank you so much for saying that. I couldn't continue with therapy either. I mean, at the time, there was no insurance reimbursement. I was driving 4 hours round trip for my treatment. It was just not financially sustainable. So a couple thoughts that I have. My first thought is spacing those sessions out. Remember, you are learning to become your own therapist. So the goal of your therapy is to no longer have it where you are only doing exposures because you are with a therapist. You're really creating and taking the tools and being your own therapist on an everyday basis. So the check-ins with your therapist can be more scattered. Another affordable option is a support group. So I know at the Gateway Institute where I work, we have really affordable support groups. I know that there's some virtual support groups. So finding a support group is an amazing option because you can get that accountability from your peers. And I know, like at our support group and a lot of support groups that I know of, they're clinician led. So you have a therapist there. And so it's really good because you can still get that like clinical feedback, peer feedback with the check-ins. When you talk about a coach, so I know that I think of a couple like peer support specialists that have gone through training, gone through credentialing, get continuing education. So I would say something like that, I would feel a little bit more confident about than offering the idea of like a general coach that doesn't have any training. So that one I'm going to kind of steer away from because it's difficult. I feel like some people do really well in OCD treatment and then don't really have any training and just want to go help others, which is admirable. And I think through advocacy, that's a great step. But I know that, there's some peer support specialists out there, specifically Shannon Shai, Chrissy Hodges. On OCD SoCal, we have Shannon Switzer, who's got her training through NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. So they have training, and I'd feel a little bit more confident with that versus somebody that's just doing it because they want to do it. But ultimately, think about a clinician ran support group if there isn't somebody who's a trained peer support specialist in your area. And I saw that there might be a talk on that at the conference. That'd be good. But lastly, what I really want to focus on with this question is how do you continue to do ERP therapy? What you want to go now that you're kind of done with completing ERP therapy, you want to go from doing like an exposure to making it a lifestyle. So here's some examples. Let's say you have hit and run OCD, and in treatment, you would get in your car, you would drive, you would check mark it on a box and go home. What you can start doing is making that everyday life. What that would look like is when you leave home each day to go to work, is there a school nearby? Is there a street with a lot of speed bumps? Is there a busy street? Take that road to get to work because that's going to be more triggering. If you have contamination with sticky things on your hand, every time you go to eat, order something that you're going to have to order with your hands. So you have to eat and get, contaminated. If you have pedophilia OCD, offer to volunteer to babysit your niece and nephew. I had a client once that was Santa Claus for Christmas at a mall. So kids had to, be around him all the time and sit on his lap. If you have OCD around bestiality with your pets, make sure that you're the one that's washing the pet, giving him his baths. You have to be around his whole body part. If you have scrupulosity OCD, making sure that faith in church is part of your life, and so that you're not avoiding the church if that's what OCD is having you to do. If you have harm OCD, making sure that almost every dish that you eat for a while includes a knife. So do you see what I'm getting at? Versus having like a chart where you go do an exposure check off. Now make it part of your everyday lifestyle. And that's how ERP is going to work for you. And it's not going to feel as much as you need a therapist. So I hope that answered your question. The first virtual question, 1207, we have Costas, who says, I have many types of OCD in the past. Without knowing what it was, I just grew out of them. But now that I know how to use ERP, I feel like I'm moving slow. So we had a conversation about that in the group last night that I run. Why do we move on from different subtypes? And the reason we move on for different subtypes is a lot of times they become irrelevant. They just aren't useful in your life anymore. So for instance, if you're triggered by something at your house, but you go off to college, that trigger at home might not be bothersome anymore. If you have pedophilia OCD and you're off at college, you might not be around many children. So OCD likes to shift and it needs to stay relevant. And so I do hear for some people, like once they hit a certain age, if their trigger is something that's around them and not going anywhere, it might be harder for them to just grow out of it. And really, you don't want to grow out of it because it means that you're never really facing it, right? Like we want to definitely face it. So when you say ERP is moving slow, what I want to remind you is that crawl. If you can't crawl, drag yourself forward. As long as you're moving forward, that's what's most important. Of course, the bigger exposures you do, the more fear that you face, the better off you're going to be, and you're going to make a lot more progress. But ultimately, moving is all that's important. So maybe Costas, in the comments, you could elaborate about what you feel like is moving slow. The real way that you can move at a good pace is while you're in treatment, have a to-do list. A lot of times we think, oh, I'll just tackle OCD on my own. No, we want to be proactive. We want to stop waiting for OCD to come along and trigger us that day, because it will move slow. Let's say I have OCD around something that I only get triggered by twice a week. Let's say it's taking the trash cans out and in each week. Maybe that's a big trigger for me. If I wait until it's trash day, that's 2 exposures a week. If every single day I come home, I take those trash cans, I drag them to the street, I pull them back in, that's 2 exposures a day. If I'm now doing that twice a day, 7 days a week, that's 14 exposures instead of 2. So have that to-do list. Every day, wake up with a list of 5 to 8 exposures at least that you are going to set out and you are going to face and do yourself. So if you're showering 2 times in a row, have on your list, I'm going to shower once. If you have on your list that you have to reread text messages before you sent them, or if you're rereading text messages before sending them, have on your list. Deliberately send text throughout the day. So every time you send a text without checking, that's an exposure. So do you see what I'm saying? Is if you can have multiple exposures a day that are planned out each day, that you're sticking to a program and you're really pushing out, now you go from 2 exposures that may come up on its own to deliberately doing 10, 15, 20, depending on how many times you repeat it. So that's going to help you move a little bit quicker throughout. So hopefully that's helpful. Michelle Hoffman, you join as a parent of a teen. So first of all, I apologize that you have a teen, because let me tell you, I was a terrible teen. So hopefully your teen is way better than I am, Michelle, because man, I was a teen with OCD and I was terrible. So I'm saying that to normalize that for all the parents and teens out there, is like, being a teen with OCD, we can be miserable, but it's the OCD, not ourselves. But you're constantly looking to educate yourself so you can help your son. Well, Michelle, first and foremost, you're at the right place. The IOCDF is the biggest, and I would argue best source for OCD information for families and loved ones and for everyone. So if you go to iocdf.org, there's plenty of information for families on there. There's 2 books that I really like. John Abramowitz just wrote a recent book for family members of someone with OCD, and maybe Skyla can look up the title because I can't think of it off the top of my head. And then John Hirschfeld also wrote a book, Loving Someone with OCD, I believe is the title. We did a book club for OCD Southern California with him, but there's so many good resources at the IOCDF. The live streams, great place for you to get information, education. The OCD Southern California Conference, ocdsocal.org. We have talks for family members. Then absolutely, please, if you can make it to Colorado this July, or the virtual conference at the end of this year through the IOCDF, there are so many. The conference is not only for people for OCD. There's so many talks and social gatherings and things for a parent with teens. So Michelle, you will absolutely love the conferences. There's so many great resources. So affiliates, if you have a local affiliate in your area, you can go to iocdf.org, I believe, /affiliates. There might be affiliate near you, and they might have constant local activities. So glad you're here. And hopefully your teen. One thing I do want to say, Michelle, I'll never forget, it was a powerful moment. There's a free family and loved ones support group that I run each month that's virtual. So it's open to anyone everywhere. If you're interested in that, if you email info@ocdsocal.org, we have a free family and loved ones support group for family members of someone supporting OCD. It's every second Saturday of the month from 11 to 1 p.m. And Liz McInville is our guest this month, so she's going to join. We have about 80 to 90 families that come. But what I wanted to throw out there for you is one of the groups, when it was in person, a teen stood up once and said, what really helped me get treatment is when my family took it seriously. When my family was finally like, look, we need to find you help. We can't take a no for an answer anymore. We need you to come along this road with us. We need to get you resources and help. They took it seriously. But when the parents were kind of in and out and iffy, the kid didn't take the treatment as seriously. So remember that it's with a teen, with a child, it starts with you. So when you let them know there's resources, there's help, we're going to get you help, they usually take it much more seriously. So hopefully that's helpful. Yes, info@ocdsocal.org if you want to join our free family and loved one support group that meets each month. All right, Tracy at 1207. My OCD causes me to fear what could go wrong, so it keeps me from going out and living as best as I could. But therapy is helping to overcome the fear. There is help. Yes, Tracy. The reason I wanted your question to go on the screen is because I wanted to, you made such a good point, is that OCD is basically a Debbie Downer, and sorry to anybody watching whose name is Debbie, but it really is a Debbie Downer. It's going to tell you all the reasons not to do something. And so sometimes when we have had OCD for so long, we forget what it's like to think of what could go wrong. So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm going to go to a restaurant and I have multiple subtypes. OCD is going to say, well, what if somebody's smoking? As you're walking to your car, you could get cancer. Oh, you're going to get in your car? Well, you might hit somebody with your car. What if the restaurant doesn't cook the food all the way and you get salmonella and get sick? What if on the way home you get robbed? What if you trip up the stairs and bang your teeth? What if you leave the stove on? I mean, depending on your subtype, right? So do you see why nobody with OCD wants to do anything? Is because OCD is throwing all those what ifs and all those potential outcomes that are going to be negative. So then we decide, oh, well, it's just easier not to go anywhere. And then you don't, so that's why we have to start to think like those things might happen. Obviously we don't want them to happen. And there's certain things you can do to be more careful. So watching the road when you drive, being a little careful when you go upstairs, etc. But at the end of the day, things do go wrong. And OCD takes away that trust in ourselves that we can handle it and we can figure it out and we'll adapt and triumph. So I think of like a seesaw. OCD is always going to tell you what's wrong. There could be right as well. And there can be some good and some bad. Look, your food could suck, right? If you go to the restaurant, but at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go, and you shouldn't face it, and you shouldn't live in those values. I have a couple of people that agree that OCD makes you stop living your full self. I absolutely agree to that. Janie says, my fiance was just saying this, explaining how I used to be. I think that's what's so difficult, especially if people meet us when we're at our worst. They don't know us. And, people will say all the time, parents will say to me, I wish you would have met my kid 2 years ago. He was laughing and he was so bubbly. And now he's vacant. And so I think what the good thing about treatment, and one of the reasons all of us lead and national advocates speak out so much and are passionate about speaking about OCD, is because of the fact that we know that the real you is underneath the OCD. And if you keep fighting, the real you comes out. So I'm glad people are relating to that. That means a lot. That is something that everybody could feel. And then MV Martino says, not only does it take over, but there's an emotional exhaustion that happens. Amen. You feel disconnected emotionally to things you once cared about. Absolutely. I mean, your brain is rewarding you every time you do a compulsion to keep yourself safe. That you don't care about the things you once enjoyed. I mean, I loved music. I loved concerts. I loved learning about what new music was coming out and downloading like the latest songs. And I would get so excited. And when OCD hit, I didn't care. I didn't listen to music. And so you start to like lose who you are and what you're connected to. And the emotional exhaustion is real. I mean, you're tired all the time, you're burnt out. And it's because we're not built to be in our fight or flight that long. We're not built to think we're in danger constantly throughout the day. We're not built to mentally and physically compulse from sun up to sundown. And that's what makes OCD so insidious, is it just drains us and takes so much from us. So that's why we got to fight. It's emotionally exhausting to fight back against the OCD, but there's a positive outcome that comes. Whereas just giving into the OCD, there's no outcome that's different. Michelle, you said it's hard for you to see your 15-year-old. Absolutely. I mean, I have clients that were athletes, or they were really good in math, and they were doing geography and word competitions through school, and they've given that up. So it's so hard to see our loved ones, if you're supporting a loved one with OCD, just absolutely kind of not be themselves. Christian, yes, it separates yourself from yourself. Kevin also says you feel like parts of your life are on hold. I think that's what's so hard, Kevin, because the OCD lies to us, right? And it says, oh, just do these 5 things and then you can get back to life. And next thing we know, it's 10 years later. So I always tell people OCD doesn't have an endpoint. It's greedy. It will keep demanding from you, and you will never give it what it wants. And you're going to see things you once cared about fall apart. And that's why we got to fight, 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 fight. So on YouTube, Go Fast Clad 97 says, yes, it's hard to tell the difference between OCD and the real you. You guys are all amazing. You are all speaking my language. I feel like I'm at home right now because I can relate to everything you're saying. Absolutely. I mean, that's what makes it so hard. And that's what we were talking about last night in our group, is sometimes we don't even know who we are. We might think like, oh, I'm a super thorough person. I like to read emails and be on top of things. You could still be that without OCD, and it makes us think we care about that, or cleaning, or being cautious, or whatever it is, and you start to lose the real self. And so what I always tell people, and here's some tips for everyone how you can tell the difference between you and OCD: is it urgent? Do you feel like you have to stop everything you're doing and give into that? That's probably OCD. That fake urgency where everything feels like a problem, that's OCD. Number 2, does everything feel like a catastrophe? Is the outcome always death, people hating you, jail, ruining people's lives, going to hell, losing connections with family? In real life, we do have consequences, but they're not always so catastrophic. So if everything that comes up is catastrophic, it's OCD. Third, is it part of your themes? Are you constantly worrying about leaving something on in the home that's going to cause harm to your family? If it's coming up again, it's probably OCD. Don't let OCD fool you that it's brand new. And then lastly, is it things that you see nobody else doing? Are you living by a different set of rules than other people? If the answer is yes, it's probably OCD. Sure, there's certain things that people, in a normal kind of range do. Some people are more clean than others. But, with the pandemic, with vaccines and with masks and with distancing, a lot of people have been able to still stay safe and get back to real life. But are you still locking yourself in and not leaving the house? Do you pray every day 3 hours? Do you read the Bible, for 4 hours a day? Are you going to every church you can Monday through Sunday? I mean, are you doing things that nobody else is doing? So what happens is, as you start to pull back from that compulsive behavior, the real you starts to come out. And it's not lost. It's in there. It's just really, really wanting you to fight it and to come out. All right. So Phyllis, we have another question at 12:12. I know that ERP and CBT are effective for OCD and BDD, as there are similarities between the two disorders, related disorders, but not the same. How does treatment for BDD differ from treatment for OCD? So I don't know if this is a spoiler alert. So if you all see me disappear and never do another stream again, email Jeff to take me out of jail. But I am so excited, Phyllis. We are doing a talk on that at the in-person conference. So maybe Jeff won't be mad because I'm promoting the conference, but we're doing a talk on how to treat OCD and BD different, because there is a lot of differences on that. So come to our talk at the Denver conference. It's early July. The biggest difference between BDD and OCD treatment is when somebody has OCD, their belief system is ego dystonic, meaning they recognize that these are thoughts they don't want, they're intrusive, they're uncomfortable, they push them away. In BDD treatment, there's a lot more ego syntonic thoughts. So they look in the mirror and truly believe they're ugly, or their nose is misshapen, or their teeth are too big for their mouth, etc. So when I'm working with a client with BDD, it's a lot more psychoeducation. It's a lot more traditional cognitive behavioral therapy to identify the errors in their thinking and to make sure that we kind of balance out their thoughts a little bit more rationally. Also, with BDD, we have to do a lot of mirror work. We have to retrain how people see themselves in mirrors and in videos and in pictures. So we work on creating a much more objective viewpoint, arm's length, the holistic, vision of themselves versus keying in on certain parts of the body. There's a lot of discussions on how society contributes to BDD. There's a lot more emotional processing because there's a lot of shame and connection with the flawed thinking. We also have to work on getting them out of the house and reconnection with people. I mean, OCD does that as well, but a lot of BDD is not wanting to connect with people because they feel like people will identify their flaws. So there's a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot more education on how people see themselves differently when they have BDD. So that's why I always recommend, if somebody's seeking out treatment for BDD, it's almost a little bit of a different language in treatment. And it's really kind of, working with some specialists. Lastly, like that comes to mind is sometimes with BDD, there's a lot of history of bullying or really like negative language from their parents growing up about appearance, or maybe some trauma around it. And so those things need to be worked out. Whereas OCD, sometimes there's no backstory to why somebody has that specific trigger. So hopefully that answers. Somebody mentioned that they have not dated with OCD. Yeah, so the studies show that people with OCD often don't work and don't date, or date later on in life. And so I always think of that as a motivator of why you should get better. Use that as like your why. Everybody needs a why in treatment. Everybody needs a reason to wake up and to decide why they're going to fight this disorder, because it's tough. And so if you miss dating, if you miss connection with someone and really want to get back out there, I love vision boards. I don't care who thinks they're cheesy, but cut out a couple, of your celebrity crushes or people you're attracted to and post them on your wall and just say, look, I want to date again. Maybe you're not going to date, J-Lo, but at least it can motivate you to just miss dating and to say, look, like OCD's taken this from me and I absolutely want it back. And I'm going to fight tooth and nail today to not give into the compulsions, because I know that's how I'm going to get back to dating. Missy says, it is worth fighting for. You are going to school to become an LPC like me. Yay, and treat OCDs with individuals. So yes, please get out there. We need more and more OCD therapists. I can tell you that the reason there aren't a lot of OCD therapists is because most people that are OCD therapists either have OCD or a loved one close to them. So you really, really, we need more and more of you therapists. So anybody with OCD that wants to, get out there and treat, we need you. At 12:12, Kira says, I notice the more I isolate, the worse my anxiety, ruminations, and intrusive thoughts get. Thank you, Kira. So part of OCD treatment is to get back into hobbies, passions, etc. The reason for that is because when you're isolated and by yourself, you have no noise, right? Except your thoughts. So you are just going to sit there and ruminate. Plus, when you're by yourself, you can get up and wash your hands. You can get up and tap 3 times. You can get up and out of your seat. You can focus on your breathing if that's your type of OCD. So what ends up happening is, because you have nobody around you and nothing to engage in, your kind of default focus is on the OCD. And so people will spend more time on the rumination, the compulsions, because they have nothing else to focus on. So you want to definitely make sure that part of your treatment is to fight back against the need to isolate. And often we isolate because nobody around us means that nobody's doing something to trigger us. But we don't look at triggers as a bad thing. We look at it as a trigger, as an opportunity to fight the OCD and get better. Thank you for your kind comment at 12:12, Betsy. At 12:13, we have Christian who says, ROCD is hard and tricky, I would say. Absolutely. So the good thing is we are doing a lunch and learn on ROCD. It's featuring a therapist out here near me in California named Shiva, who just wrote a book on relationship OCD. So unless I'm completely off, I believe it's this month. I believe it's the fourth Wednesday of this month is the lunch and learn on relationship OCD. So Christian, please, please, please come back. We would love to have you at that lunch and learn where we'll go more in depth. But one of the reasons relationship OCD is so hard is because it's involving another person. So we're tempted to ask the other person for reassurance, and people are not predictable. So OCD wants, if I have OCD around, is my stove on or off, I can kind of control the stove. But let's say my partner isn't sending enough emojis, or let's say my partner dresses in a certain way that OCD says, wait, like, do they not care anymore? Or whatever it is, we can't control the other person. And so that's part of the reason why it's so difficult, relationship OCD, because of that fact that it's around another person. All right, I'm going to jump really quick to our pre-submitted questions. As a parent, how do I give my adult son the space and support he needs, even though I worry that he's stuck in rumination? Great question. So one of our board members at OCD SoCal is Barbara Vanopin, and she has done a lot of amazing work on family accommodation and family contracting. And what I always suggest when you are a family member, a husband, wife, best friend, cousin, uncle, parent of somebody who has OCD, who's an adult and is kind of doing their own treatment, you want to find that perfect balance. If you're too pushy and you're too overwhelming, the problem is they might kind of resent your relationship and pull back. So what I suggest is, when your son isn't struggling and he isn't in the worst of it, create kind of a verbal contract. Go out to go out to eat at his favorite restaurant, sit down and talk on a day that you both hang out, and say, hey, I noticed that I see you in rumination a lot. And the way that I can kind of tell is you're sort of like staring at a wall and like blanked and checked out. And even when you're with your family, you're not really kind of engaging in the conversation. You're sort of just in your head a lot. How would you like me to support you in that? I want to give you some time to get out of it yourself. So I don't need to like tell you the second I notice it. But let's say we're at a family dinner and it's been 20, 30 minutes where you're kind of doing the whole, yeah, because you're in your head ruminating. How would you like me to point it out? What would you like as support? I want to be able to support your treatment. The thing that you hope they're going to say is that they're like, well, if you notice it and give me like 15 minutes to get out of myself, let's have a code word. Or if you're open about OCD around family and friends, just let me know, like, hey, I noticed that you're in your head and you're ruminating, trying to fix something. Why don't you come back to the present? Because what the individual with OCD needs to realize is rumination is a compulsion. And it's because you're trying to get clarity with a thought, or check something, or fix something in your head. And it's something that you're not going to fix in your head. And that's why rumination is terrible, is because you could ruminate for hours and it's a constant compulsion. So when that person becomes present, focuses outward, and lets go of trying to solve the problem and tolerating the fact that it's not solved, they can re-engage in life. And that's what you're trying to guide them to do, is re-engage in the present moment. So if they're struggling to do that on their own, then what you can definitely do is have that conversation ahead of time. How would you like support in that moment? And then that way they can help. So, all right. We have a question from Tracy at 1214. You're doing DBT now. And for anybody that's new to this, Liz and I were talking about it. DBT can help with emotional regulation pre-ERP if you're really struggling. What exactly is the R in response prevention? So the E stands for exposure. So the exposure is basically facing a fear. So if I have a fear that my phone is contaminated, my exposure would be to touch my phone. The RP stands for response prevention. So the R is the response. Typically, our response is a compulsion. So my R would be, if I touch this phone and I feel like it's dirty, my response would be to clean the phone and then clean my hands. So response prevention means touching my phone and then not cleaning it or cleaning my hands. And obviously that's going to accelerate my anxiety, because I've taught my brain for so long that if I touch my phone, it's dirty, go clean your hands. So by resisting and accepting the discomfort and choosing to move forward anyways, I am teaching my brain, remember, ERP is a teaching tool, that the phone and my hands don't need to be cleaned immediately after touching it. I'm no longer aiming to do that. I'm delaying and eventually eliminating. So that's what the RP stands for. Gentile, you ask at 12:15, what do I do if I can't find an ERP therapist in my country. What I would suggest doing is emailing the IOCDF at info@iocdf.org. And the reason for that is I know that they have a lot of global partners, and they can offer different therapy. Like the global partners can recommend different therapy. Because I'm not sure if the find help option has therapists from all over the country. I would still try iocdf.org/find-help. But if not, go to the IOCDF, email them. I do know they have global partners. I also know No OCD, which is treatmyocd.com, I believe, is open in some countries. But if you can't find it, reach out to the IOCDF, because I know that I remember a long time ago I had a client looking for some treatment in another country, and the IOCDF linked them up with someone out there who did a lot of advocacy and a lot of work out there and linked them up. And like a comment said, is you can always read some self-help books and online therapy. I'm going to answer your question, Tracy, because this is a good one for everyone at 12:16. And how do I stop mental rumination? So remembering that rumination is a compulsion. So if the initial intrusive thought happens at 10 o'clock a.m., if you're still thinking about it at 4 p.m., that's no longer an obsession. That's a compulsion, because you've been engaging with those thoughts for all those hours. So like I said, rumination is trying to remember, figure out, solve, check in your head. And what we want to do is recognize that we're no longer going to try to solve it. So let's say I have false memory OCD or real event OCD, and I'm remembering a party that I went to in, when I was a senior in high school, and I drank alcohol and drove home. Let's say that that person's going through that, and now they're 30 and they're trying to remember, did I hit somebody when I was driving home? And there's physical compulsions, maybe like researching accidents at that time. But let's say the mental rumination is trying to remember that day, trying to remember that night, going like moment by moment, trying to remember what happened that night. That's the compulsion. So the way that you stop that is you say, look, I have two choices. I can continue to try to remember and solve or fix, or I can disengage. I think of it as almost like you're kind of closing the file, like a cold case detective, and you're putting it in a shelf, and you're walking away and you're saying, I will never remember clearly what happened that night. I've already tried. A, it's happened so many years ago. B, there was alcohol involved. I just don't know. And in fact, the more I try to ruminate and remember, the messier and foggier the memory gets, because I start doubting myself. So what I'm going to do is move forward. Now I'm going to have guilt. I'm going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel like I'm being irresponsible and not solving it. But that is the treatment. I'm living in that uncertainty of not knowing what happened all those years ago. And if something comes out, if somehow I get found by a detective, sure, I'll face the consequences. But I have OCD. I can't trust all of my thoughts and memories. So I'm going to choose to re-engage in life and put that behind me. OCD may still whisper in my ear. I can't stop the thoughts, but I can stop my relationship with the thoughts. If my old relationship was giving into everything OCD said, my new relationship is no longer responding every time it asks me. And you are teaching your brain to not engage with every what if, every question. And what you'll start to notice is by focusing outward and engaging in your surroundings and really letting those thoughts be back there without really like choosing to have that back and forth conversation, the thoughts are there, but they start to fade. And over time, you teach your brain not to listen to all of those. Somebody asked, how do I make Bettina at 1220 asked, how do I make magical thinking exposures a lifestyle? They are cursed thoughts. So I'm going to try to answer that question best I can with the information I was given. So let's say somebody has magical thinking, and let's say it's thoughts. I'm guessing what you mean by cursed thoughts is, let's say they're negative thoughts. And every time you have a negative thought, you are afraid that something bad's going to happen unless you count to 10 in your head and think of the color green. I'm just throwing something out there. So let's say I'm walking along the street. I have a negative thought, which you're calling cursed thoughts, and I count to 10 and think of green. The way that you would make that a lifestyle is you stop waiting for OCD to bring up those cursed thoughts. You bring them up yourself. That is going to sound crazy. Why would I deliberately bring up these thoughts? You're deliberately bringing up these thoughts because the more you can bring up these thoughts and then not responding to them, you are teaching your brain, I don't have to treat every thought like it's real and do something about it. So some of the ways you can have the thoughts come up is you can, on the back of your phone, my lock screen is my dog, but you can have a picture of a triggering image that brings up those curse thoughts. You can have sticky notes around your house where you're writing the triggering word on that. You can have a note card that has the triggering word that you pull out of your purse every once in a while. You can record yourself saying some of those thoughts and playing it and listening to it on headphones. So what you're doing is you're deliberately bringing on those thoughts, and then you're refraining from counting to 10 and thinking of the color green. And that's going to then, because there's no compulsion, the obsession, the trigger and the obsession is going to start to fade. So hopefully that answers. But the goal is to deliberately bring these things on yourself instead of waiting for it to be there. Nikki at 1222 says, I do an exposure whenever I write something on here because it's live. I don't have to check what I've written. It's tough. What is so great, Nikki, is use us as an exposure. Isn't that awesome, right? Like, not only are you coming to hang out with us, but you're doing an exposure. So the best thing you could do is write, click send, and then don't turn back and tolerate the fact that something bad might happen. We will see. All right, Dorothy at 1225 says, you were in communication with me. If I dropped the ball, I am really, really sorry. I'm a parent of a teen, and he's been working on ERP with his therapist and has a lot of progress reducing compulsions, but is struggling with technology-based fears. His phone, laptop, sending a back text, getting hacked. Are there a lot of people who struggle with the fear of technology getting hacked? I don't know much about that. First of all, Dorothy, if I dropped the ball in our communication, I am so sorry. Please email. We should have a separate email, but if you email the IOCDF at info@iocdf.org, or if you have my email, just re-email me. Sometimes with emails, they get buried and I get behind, but definitely email me. Yes, a lot of people have that fear about technology getting hacked. So for instance, I'll have clients that can't join school stuff on their computer because of Zoom. I've had clients who are teenagers that will get a flip phone so people can't do it, can't hack it. So there's this constant fear of it getting hacked. Text messages, it going somewhere. They don't want to download an app or the latest update. And just like anything with ERP, people have to ask themselves, is this a sustainable lifestyle? So as a 20-year-old who's growing up in such a technology-based world, he's not going to be able to sustain this. He's not. And so he's going to have to decide that at some point he has to lean into this. Now, we can still be cautious. There are definitely people without OCD that are more on the cautious side, and that's fine. We want to find that normal range, cautious, not cautious, and meet somewhere in there versus being an extreme. So what I would say with this therapist is what he needs to work on is maybe writing down all the technology-based things he avoids, ranking them from easiest to hardest, and start slowly. So what I've had clients do is, for instance, is turn on their phone and just keep it on during session because they would turn it off in the fear that somebody would hack and listen to our session. So sometimes that's a good starting point, is just bringing the phone into session and turning it on, but not touching it. So it's very, very common. But what I remind clients is it's something that eventually you're going to have to face because, it's not going anywhere, technology. But Tina at 1226 says, OCD is forcing you to do one last compulsion before diving into ERP. Don't fall for it. That is just like an addict who wants one more drink. OCD is always going to tell you just do one last compulsion. That is the biggest lie. And as soon as you give into a compulsion, the more and more you give into compulsions, it starts to become like a domino effect. So absolutely don't do it. Somebody from YouTube said, is this OCD questions are great. I'm glad that was helpful. So that's awesome. Costa says, could a divorce in my family, my parents make OCD worse at 1232? Any life stressor, divorce, it can be a good stressor, a move and a promotion, but getting fired, a death in the family. The reason OCD is going to be worse is because we've trained our brain that every time we're anxious, we do a compulsion to bring our anxiety down. So over time, when life anxieties come up, the OCD says, hey, do a compulsion, it'll bring anxiety down. So when you're triggered, you have less of an ability to fight back against the OCD. So if you know that there's some kind of stressor in your family, make sure that you are ready. What you do is you proactively fight OCD before it can fight you. So don't wait hoping that OCD won't pop up its ugly head. Jump out in front of it and deliberately do ERP and trigger yourself to make sure that you're on top of it. Pauline called me a star, so you're my fave. So thank you so much. But Han, and I'm butchering the name at 1234, says, can't control when I have the urge to watch pornographic images, but then I go through intense shame and adherence to myself. I'm confused if it's moral scrupulosity or not. Yes. So when people have an urge, it's not just pornography, it can be anything. People have OCD around staring at certain parts of people's bodies. There's certain taboo things people look up on the internet. And the hard thing is, depending on who you ask, some people don't think pornographic images are wrong. Some people do. I mean, it comes down to morals, or for a lot of people, it can come down to religious scrupulosity based on what their faith said. So, what I tell clients to do is to tap into their values. If it's something they don't really care about, they're fine watching that, but the OCD is making them feel shameful. That's where, instead of anxiety, you might be feeling shame. And that's what you want to fight back against, is you don't want to give in to the OCD to get rid of that shame, because then you're going to reinforce that. Let's say you don't want to watch those kind of images, but you're having this urge to, then the exposure would be different. It would be not watching those images. And then once again, if you get shame even from just having that urge, remember, we can't with OCD control our urges, our thoughts, our feelings, our any of that. It's all intrusive. That's why we have the O in OCD. So a mistake a lot of people make is they blame themselves for the intrusive thoughts and feelings that they have. We can't control them. So the sooner you can separate yourself from the disorder, name it, and recognize, hey, the OCD is having me have this urge. It's not in line with my values. I don't need to feel guilty or shame for something I didn't do. All right. So I'm going through some more of your questions. Thank you, everybody, so much for questions. Thank you, Margaret Sisson. I love Margaret. She says hi. She's one of the most amazing people. Um, so thank you so much, Skyla, for putting all of the different information in there. Um, I will jump to one more of our pre-submitted question. It says, how does one do ERP exercises for having fear of the fear? So a lot of times with OCD, people will have fear and triggers about the fear itself. So it's not necessarily that they are worried about a specific outcome. Maybe they're not worried about getting cancer and dying, or worrying about hitting somebody with their car, but maybe they're just afraid of being triggered and having fear. So the mistake people with OCD do is they almost walk around and kind of look around and they're like, I can't be triggered. I don't want to have fear. I need to figure out how to reduce fear. So then people will come up with compulsions. It might be isolation, it might be scanning and checking. But here's what you're doing it. The more you resist, the more you persist. The more you're doing this, the more attuned you are to these thoughts and feelings. So the problem that ends up happening is, the more that you are afraid of the fear and the more you resist the fear, the more you're kind of looking out for it and scanning for it, and the more you're going to be attuned to it, and the more you're going to be focused on it. So if I'm waking up each day and I'm afraid of being triggered and having some fear, I'm going to be walking throughout my whole day on my tippy toes, on eggshells, and scanning for it, which means I'm going to think about it and experience it so much more. If instead I say, you know what, just like with thoughts, OCD also gives me intrusive, unwanted feelings. I cannot be worried about feelings anymore. I can't. I'm going to have feelings. They're temporary experiences. When I eat a really good meal, I don't think the happiness from that meal is going to last till I'm 87. If I go on a roller coaster and have a great time on the ride, I don't think that I'm going to have that same amazing experience for the next 50 years. I recognize I had fun on the roller coaster, but I'm going to go home, go to bed, and it's going to be fun memories, but not have that same level of excitement. But for some reason with OCD, we think that fear, shame, anxiety is going to last forever. If I'm triggered and have anxiety, it's going to last forever till I do the compulsion. Just like with good experiences and emotions, bad experiences and emotions are temporary as well. So we don't want to fear the fear anymore. We want to say, look, fear is going to happen. There's no human being on this planet that does not experience fear. So I'm going to have fear today. Probably. I have OCD. Why wouldn't I? But it's a temporary experience, and I get to choose the relationship I have with that fear. So if I experience the fear, I can panic, freak out, do compulsions, which I know will make it worse, or I can simply experience that fear. I can recognize it's a temporary experience that my body will kind of release whenever it wants to. But the less I do, and when I drop compulsions, I'm not feeding that fear. I'm not keeping it around. And what you'll actually be surprised is, the less you do, the quicker the fear goes away. So in conclusion, if you expect the fear, if you know it's coming, if you tolerate it when it's there and you move forward anyways, the fear won't be as much of a barrier as you think. But if you fear the fear and you're worried about the fear, whether it's from exposures or from being triggered or from going out, that fear is going to be front and center. And that's why it gets so loud. Betsy says, the more ERP I do, the more I feel a variety of feelings. It's at 12:52. I'm almost caught up. Yes, so it can be a couple different things. So if you're doing ERP and getting better, you're going to feel a variety of feelings because that means that you're getting better. And instead of feeling fear and panic all the time, you're feeling happiness, joy, etc. If instead what you're saying is when you do ERP, you're feeling a variety of feelings that are deemed more negative, that could happen as well. Because remember, our compulsions try to prevent us from feeling any kind of negative feelings, or we feel in very short time till we do the compulsion. So as you drop those compulsions, you might feel more shame, more guilt, more anxiety, more panic. But this is a temporary experience. As you continue with the ERP and push through, you get better. And then, like I said, you'll start feeling a lot better of experiences. You'll start to feel a lot more positive experiences. Shannon at 12:52 says, my daughter won't engage in therapy. I'm guessing she's young. Typically, selective mutism impacts younger children. So I'm not sure how old she is. So selective mutism is its own diagnosis in the DSM. So it's not OCD or an OCD related disorder. So what I would suggest, I don't know if we've ever done a live stream on selective mutism specifically. It would be something that is really good for us to do, or to at least maybe link you with some resources. So one of the things we heard from a last live stream is we need to get a psychiatrist on here to answer medication questions. So we put that down. So maybe Skyla, you can write down something, either resources or a talk for selective mutism. So yeah, it impacts a lot of younger children who have gone through different trauma, have gone through extreme OCD and anxiety disorders. And so typically people will say that they might speak to like a mom or someone they feel safe with, but they might not speak in public in school or in therapy. What I would suggest is finding somebody who specifically works with selective mutism. Shannon, I hope you join us maybe in 2 weeks, because next week is a research roundtable. That will give us a couple weeks to find some resources and we can throw those out there. But I would find somebody who specializes in it. I know in Orange County, there was a therapist. I don't know if they're still here, but we suggested some clients to work on that. I mean, just like we eat, breathe, and sleep OCD and related disorders, they're going to really work and speak on that. So that would be my suggestion for that, Shannon. Because one thing that worked for me until this therapist could see the client, I had a client that had selective mutism. They were willing to draw things and do things through pictures. You know, the other thing is what I remember from working with co-occurring with this therapist is to rule out autism. So that would be something, but kids with selective mutism don't always have autism. But this client was willing to draw things out and do things with like blocks and shapes to communicate instead of talking. So that's how we got therapy up and running until they worked with the other therapist. So hopefully that is helpful, but we'll find you some stuff. Val Andrews, one of our IOCF lead advocates and one of my faves, says hi. Thank you so much. I'm trying to get through everything because I have a minute. I don't know if I'm going to get to a minute. So this is what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to have, oh, Shannon, she's 15. Yeah, I would definitely, Shannon, I would rule out autism spectrum disorder. She may not. I'm just saying that that can sometimes be the case. But if she's 15 and still having selective mutism, which is not abnormal at that age either, please find somebody that specializes in it, because you know, just like with OCD, you want somebody that really knows it. But we will work on getting you something. So come back in a couple weeks. In 2 weeks, we'll be back, Liz and I. The last question I'm going to answer, because I'm at time. Tracy, 1 minute ago, says, how can we go this long without knowing OCD? And this is why. It's because OCD can sometimes prey on real things. COVID is real. Hitting somebody with your car is real. Wanting to be connected with your faith is real. People snapping and harming others is real. Plane crashes are real. Getting sick from food is real. You know what I'm saying? So the OCD just takes it, blows it up, makes it a bigger problem, has us fixate on it. So magical thinking OCD is the only subtype that I really don't think is connected with reality. Like if I don't blink when I see a yellow car, my dad will die. I mean, that's the only one that's not based in reality. But the other OCD stuff, a lot of times it's real things just taken to an extreme catastrophic outcome. So that's part of the reason that we have sometimes not knowing. Plus, we're working really hard at the IOCDF to get information and education out there, but it's not always out there. So, um, definitely it's one of those things where the more information we get out, the more people realize that they have OCD. Some of us lead and national advocates just did an interview, and the interview was about was more intrusive thoughts based OCD, and I think it's going to be good because I do believe a lot of reasons people don't get diagnosed is their OCD is much more internal with intrusive thoughts, and because of that, they don't end up getting any help because they don't think it's OCD because it's all intrusive thoughts and not really external things. Shipla, you said, please address your query. I didn't see it. So Skyla, if we could find Shilpa's question. Oh, how do you change your disgust perception in COCD? I'm guessing COCD means contamination. That's usually the C that I see. So yes. So sometimes with contamination, it's not about feeling getting cancer or getting sick or get an illness. It's just gross and just disgust. And so what we have to recognize is that's a negative experience that we don't enjoy. And so because we don't enjoy that, we push it away. We resist it. If I resist because I don't like the way something sticky feels because it makes me feel gross, or if it's around throw up is typically, or bodily fluids, there's a disgust factor. But the good thing is ERP works with that just as well, because maybe you don't have the intrusive thoughts, but you're still resisting the intrusive feelings and the negative emotions you get. So I had a lot of disgust with my OCD. So for instance, like there were certain things like sticky surfaces that didn't make me think I was going to die. It just was absolutely gross and made me feel gross. And so when we have resistance against a gross feeling, just like anything else, is we want to work slowly. We want to work slow up that hierarchy. And so what I started doing is ordering things that had mayonnaise in it, jelly. Those were like the big ones. I also had disgust with scents. I didn't like the smell of bacon, pizza, coffee, and like air fresheners. So for me, it was like putting the air freshener down the hall where I could still smell it, but barely, and then sitting with it. And maybe I was reading a book or I was doing something, but it was tolerating that experience. And what happened is over time, just like now I can eat peanut butter and jelly. I actually like peanut butter and jelly. I make a healthy peanut butter and jelly with whole wheat, real peanut butter and real jelly. But now I can eat it. But I didn't have a fear around mayonnaise and jelly that made any sense. It was just the gross factor. It made me feel so disgusting. I hated lotion. I hated the feeling of lotion. So I started putting lotion on my hands and getting used to it. So the good thing is, just because there isn't a core fear or underlying fear, it's more of a disgust. The more that you can put yourself to it, the better it gets. So hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't answer your question fully, if I completely was wrong, okay, you said it was contamination. Yeah, I think sometimes because people don't have an underlying fear, they think that they can't get better from it. But I got better from my disgust around lotion, textures, feels. I didn't like, I still do this a little bit because it rubs against my beard, but it was like with clothing as well. So I started getting clothing that had tags and wearing it. So it's things like that where you can deliberately put yourself against it, and your anxiety will go down. So, all right. Thank you so much. I see a last minute question. I can't get to it because I'm going to get yelled at. We're over time. But if we could put down your question via Shali Jain at 12:03, let's put it on our list of pre-submitted questions for our Ask the Experts, and come back in 2 weeks and we will start with your question about intrusive thoughts around liking a family member. So we will get to that first. So come back in 2 weeks. Everybody has already written so many sweet messages in the chat thanking me. I thank you. I mean, like I always say. Okay, and then also, Skyla, can we put Shilpa's follow-up question at 12:04? So Shilpa, come back in 2 weeks. We will do that with follow-up question because I want to give that question the attention and the seriousness that it deserves. So if we're at time and I don't want to give you guys a quick 2-second answer, I want to give it the attention that it deserves. So we will put that on our list and we will answer your 2 questions first with Liz and I in 2 weeks. We promise, promise, promise. And yes, Dorothy, this will be up on our YouTube at IOCDF It's slash IOCDF on YouTube and then on Facebook as well. You can go to iocdf.org/live, and that will have all the links so you can have your son watch this back. But thank you, everybody, for your questions. I could not have done this hour without your questions and your conversations. And remember, you can get your identity back from OCD, fight the good fight, use treatment, and start to engage back in your values and goals and habits and things you enjoy. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this last hour. I really enjoyed everybody with your questions and your support. A few closing announcements. This live stream is one of many. You can see the entire schedule and submit questions and suggestions for future streams, like the pre-submitted questions we got at iocf.org/peace of mind. You can also view recordings of past live streams, including this one, at youtube.com/IOCDF, and make sure that you like and subscribe to get notified. If you need any resources, please make sure that you go to iocdf.org. Thank you, everybody, for a great, great hour. I appreciate all the conversation. To those questions we didn't get to, we will answer them in 2 weeks. We really appreciate your time. The IOCDF is your one-stop shop to getting help, support, and as Liz always says, help and hope is available. I'm Chris Tronson, one of the lead advocates here. Thank you for hanging out with me the last hour. Take care, and I'll see you back in 2 weeks with Liz. Bye.